Joseph Rothschild here, aka MBT, back with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. What a weekend. I spent the last few days in Niagara, excited to see what unseen jank lurked in the corners of the format. Instead, I was devastated to see everyone playing good decks. Blech. Among those meta sheep were a few souls who put their own spin on Sprite. Presenting RUNICK SPRIGHT.
I realized the moment I fell into the fissure that the book would not be destroyed as I had planned.
So here's the list, and this is heavily influenced by Quantal Think, who I met at Niagara, didn't realize who they were, and concluded 3 days of hanging around them by saying, "Holy shit, you're Quantal!" As always, I'll give you a background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and of course, the card by card. But first, this video is sponsored by Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro Deck just got a huge redesign, but it's still the #1 place to go for a pack simulator, a card database, and a wealth of strategy articles. I personally use the site to post every 10-minute testing list and every Chalice Slime Monthly Top Cut entry. Give it a look at www.ygoprodeck.com. With that, let's wrestle with RUNICK. RUNICK is mostly a series of quick play spell cards designed to represent the choices made by the player in a generic JRPG. And like 99% of JRPGs, your choices really don't matter. Each RUNICK quick play spell card can fusion summon a RUNICK monster to the EMZ or perform a random, occasionally relevant effect, then banish a few cards off the top of your opponent's deck at the cost of your battle phase. Most of their extra deck monsters don't deserve mention. They look like the kind of twinks you'd see in a very targeted femboy collection gacha game. So I've heard. But one of them has 2 stars, so what better time to turn our brains completely off and jam it in a shell alongside Sprite? As silly as this sounds, there's actually a lot of subtle synergies between the RUNICK cards and Sprite. RUNICK is garbage at ending the game on its own, but being able to build big boards resolves that problem entirely. Sprite has trouble cleaning up established setups due to its monster's extremely low attack stats, but RUNICK allows you to remove threats without even going to the battle phase. Sprite succeeds when it's got a steady supply of monsters in the hand, and the RUNICK field spell lets you trade bricky quick plays for Sprite gas. By making Hugin and then summoning any lightning boy, you can both get to Gigantic, add the field spell, and clear the EMZ to refuel. Finally, as I'm sure you're all aware, at the time of posting, Mystic Mine is legal, and the RUNICK cards ensure you're always winning the mine off by decreasing the number of cards in the opponent's deck. Don't worry, we aren't playing it today, but just keep it in mind. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First up, some hand traps. 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, 3 Effect Failure, and 3 Infinite Impermanence. After that, we've got our Sprites set up, 3 Jet, 1 Red, 3 Blue, and a Carrot. Finally, we've got the Frogs, 3 Swap, and 1 Ronin Totem. Nothing particularly interesting. For spells, we've got 3 copies of Sprite Starter, 3 copies of RUNICK Freezing Curse, which allows you to target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, and then banish the top 3 cards of their deck. RUNICK Tip, which allows you to add a RUNICK card from your deck to your hand except for Tip, then banish the top card of your opponent's deck. And RUNICK Flashing Fire, which allows you to target a special summoned monster your opponent controls, destroy it, then banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Finally, we've got a Smashers and the card that brings it all together, RUNICK Fountain. This card allows you to activate RUNICK quick play spell cards from your hand during your opponent's turn, and then once per turn, as a soft, if you activate a RUNICK quick play spell card, you can target up to 3 RUNICK quick play spells in your graveyard, place them at the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw the same number of cards. It turns out, Spellbook of Judgment is probably good enough to build around. In the extra, we've got 2 Hugin Wings of the Mist rune. This is the only fusion that you play. It's got 2 stars, and if it's special summoned from the extra deck, you can discard a card to add a RUNICK field spell from your deck to your hand. If another card you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card you control instead, and if it leaves the field by battle or card effect, you can return it to the extra. After that, we've got some Xyz. You do still have a pretty easy Zeus line, even though you're cut off from the battle phase most turns. We've got, of course, the Sky Thunder and Downward Magician alongside a Sky Cav. We're playing 1 copy of Totally Awesome, 1 copy of Onibimaru, 2 Gigantic Sprites, and then 1 apiece of Nightmare Phoenix, Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, Area the Water Charmer Gentle, and 3 Sprite Elf. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first match is up against Valance, and oh god, I have no idea what this deck does. Thankfully, we're going first, so depending on our setup, we might not have to ever figure it out. This hand is a little strange. We've opened Fountain, which doesn't happen often. We're going to go for Tip in order to grab ourselves a copy of Freezing. Then we'll activate the effect of the Fountain, drawing into a 2. Thank goodness. This allows us to go from Hugin into Sprite Red, and then into Gigantic Sprite. We're going to use it to get a copy of Swap Frog from deck, and time for the combo that you're all assuredly sick of. Elf targeting Swap Frog, activating the Swap Frog effect in order to send a Swap Frog to the graveyard, activating Ronin Toad, banishing that Swap Frog, and down comes the boy. We'll set 1 Smashers and pass back to our opponent. We're telegraphing the Smashers a little bit here, but we are going to go for the Totally Awesome in standby phase, so we have something inconsequential to banish. Our opponent's going to begin with a Seon. We will, I suppose, Ghost Ogre that. They'll go for the second copy before activating the effect of Baron. That's fine. Now that they have a monster on their side of the field, I feel a lot safer going for the Totally Awesome than activating the effect, then activating the effect of the Sprite Elf to bring it back to our side of the field to negate their next play. They're going to go for Mad Marquis. We will negate its effect by using the Freezing Chains in our hand. Then at resolution, we can activate the effect of the Fountain in order to shuffle 2 of those back and draw 2 cards, including a hand trap. They'll go into their very powerful Fusion monster with 0 protection, so we're able to banish it using our copy of Smashers. They'll pass back to us, and that should be the end of the game. Now, we're not going to get a battle phase this turn, so we're just going to extend as far as we can. We'll go into Phoenix, pitching this copy of Nibiru to clear their scales. They're only going to have 2 cards, and we're going to be able to negate one of them. We'll go to the battle phase in order to get the trigger that prevents us from entering the next one off before we fade another draw from our opponent. We'll go for the Ronin Toad in graveyard before activating Sprite Starter. That's going to get us a blue from deck, and then afterwards we're going to activate the effect of blue in order to get a copy of Jet. We'll special the Jet, and this should be well over lethal, considering our Gigantic Sprite is at a healthy 3,200 attack points with that Nightmare Phoenix tucked well beneath it. While this deck's pool of answers is incredibly deep, lack of a battle phase means you are effectively cut off from one of the deck's most powerful equalizers in Zeus. That's one of the reasons why this deck is so formidable in its pure variant, and one of the reasons why it has a hard time keeping up in grind games where it doesn't find the field spell. Let's show that off in a game versus Labyrinth, where our opponent has drawn effectively 4 traps and the field spell. We'll draw for turn, and our hand is pretty good as well. We're going to begin with a copy of Swap Frog. We're going to send a copy of Ronin Toad into the graveyard. Then afterwards, our opponent is going to activate Welcome Labyrinth to get a copy of Silver Castle, send our Swap Frog, and then trigger both the Silver Castle and the Chandra Engrave. We can go ahead and Freezing Curses in order to negate that effect. We'll go for the Ronin, just trying to stick a 2 here. They're going to Ledger Book it away. Wow. And then they'll trigger the effect of the Labyrinth in order to get a copy of Chandra to field. We'll activate the Flashing Fire to make Hugin. They'll Compulse, and now we should be fine. We'll go Jet into blue. They will banish their last piece of interaction, Backjack, for a dead Welcome Labyrinth as we go for a Jet. So things should be good here. Would be fantastic to make Zeus, but instead we can still manage something that looks decent. We'll go Carrot into Gigantic Sprite to get a copy of Swap into rotation. We'll go Onibimaru Soul Sweeper in order to banish our opponent's Welcome Labyrinth. And then, of course, we will go for the Sprite Elf to bring back the Swap Frog and make a Totally Awesome. We'll pass back to our opponent after going to the battle phase in order to trigger the condition. Then we'll go for Sprite Elf at end of main in order to bring back Carrot. They can clear our Elf, but we do have negation for their traps 2 times over. And then I realized that Onibimaru is only for 1 turn cycle, meaning that Silver Castle will prevent us from responding to the activation of normal trap cards. Our opponent is going off with the tools that we know they have, ending on an Ariana, and unfortunately clearing our entire field in the process. They draw off the top an Extravagance, and this is just all she wrote. They'll draw 2 cards, including an Ariana, which is going to grab them another very powerful card before they get in for a ton of damage. Almost no individual draw sans Mystic Mine would do it, and the Silver Castle resetting the copy of Compulse is just icing on the cake. We do draw Flash Fire, but unfortunately that is not even remotely enough to get us out of this game. They'll go for Ariana and Labyrinth and Welcome, and we will sit and watch them resolve an 8-chain long resolution. We'll pass back to them and concede. So it's time for game 3, and you know what that means, a best of 3 versus meta. Our opponent's playing Tearlament, Danger Tearlament to be exact, the build that took the meta by storm, which includes Albion the Shrouded Dragon and Branded in High Spirits. They'll draw a card, and yeah, that is exactly what you think it is. Eradicator Epidemic Virus has become such a mainstay of the Tearlament end board that it's unlikely spell-based decks like mine are going to be able to break through it. Our opponent's going for the Kitkalos line here. They'll activate the effect, tagging out for a Merly, and milling 8 cards in the process. We have to hope they're all whiffs, and big surprise, they're not. They'll go for Sheeran and Merly here in order to make both a Kaleido Heart and, of course, a copy of Garuo, which I am frustrated to admit is a really important and powerful part of the setup combo. They'll make a Curious here, and then activate the effect Effect of the Curious and the Garua in sequence, milling a Snow, before activating Curious to mill 3. They'll go Danger Nessie afterwards. They do hit it, and then they can activate Zephyros to put it back into the hand and make a Topologic Zeroboros. They'll pass back to us, and there it is in draw phase, EEV. We're going to chain as much as we can. We're going to go for the Freezing Curses and the tip and the starter. This is going to resolve in a very strange way. We'll go for the Jet and the Hugin, and we'll banish some cards off the top of our opponent's deck. We'll go for the Jet and the Hugin activation. They will Hoff in response, then Suliek in response to negate the effect of my Jet. This is going to send the Kaleido to the graveyard, which allows them to, of course, trigger the effect of the Kaleido and the Sheeran, which is going to allow them to perform a fusion summon of a Dragostapelia using the Garua in graveyard, bring back the Kaleido Heart, trigger the Kaleido Heart and the Perlino and the Hoffianus, which allows them afterwards to fusion summon a Kitkalos. They're going to banish this copy of Hugin, and then afterwards they can add a Rhino Heart to hand, go for Snow, and did you realize we are still in the draw phase? We'll go to main phase 1 here and normal summon a copy of Swap Frog. They're going to Dragostapelia. It's no big deal, but actually it's a huge deal because we don't even get a battle phase, and as a result we have just lost the game entirely. Our opponent draws for turn and will concede. So it's time for game 2, and this hand looks okay. We've got a couple of hand traps. We're going to go for the Swap Frog here in order to send a copy of Swap Frog to the graveyard, then the Ronin to bring it back. Afterwards, we're going to make ourselves a copy of Gigantic. We'll activate Gigantic's effect in order to get a blue. We'll activate Blue's effect in order to get, you guessed it, a Jet. We'll special the Jet and then activate the effect in order to grab from deck to hand a copy of Starter before going into an Elf, activating the effect of Elf, summoning back the Swap Frog, activating the Swap Frog's effect, sending a copy of Swap Frog, and then banishing for Ronin Toad and overlaying for Toad, and let's not give them a good Super Poly, passing back here. They draw for turn, and it's branded in High Spirits. They're going to go for Perlino here. We'll activate Ash Blossom in response. Next, they're going to go for Nessie, and we do snipe the Jet, which is pretty important. They're going to go for a Danger Jackalope afterwards, and we American snipe that as well, allowing them to go into Dark. They're going to Dark for blue, but it doesn't search Jet because we've already sent it to the graveyard. After this, we're going to go for Flashing Fire in order to get rid of that Dark, and because they have a monster on the field, we can activate Toad, then bring the Toad back with Elf as well. Things are looking pretty good. They can Super Poly away our Jet for a Garua, and then they can activate the effect of the Destrudo that they binned, but that doesn't really do anything, especially when we start her for a red. They'll go to the battle phase and walk over the Elf, but we should be able to have it from here, provided that set card isn't anything, and we know it isn't. We'll go ahead and special summon this copy of Jet. We'll activate the Jet effect in order to grab Smashers. We're going to go to the graveyard for an Elf. We'll summon back blue and then trigger the effect of the blue for a Carrot. We'll add the Carrot to hand and then special summon the Carrot, contesting the back row before going for Ronin Toad and overlaying for an Onibimaru. We'll activate Onibimaru on the Garua and, well, just set a card, proceed to the battle phase, get our turn, skip, and pass. They draw probably the best card remaining in their deck off the top, but Rhino Heart still falls to the Totally Awesome, so we will be taking it here. We'll activate the effect of the Toad and, of course, the effect of the Elf as well in order to bring back the Toad, and our opponent will pass turn, getting back their Garua. We should be able to make a lethal push here. We're going to activate the effect of the Onibimaru, getting rid of the defense position monster before going for Rhino Heart, a flip summon, bringing back another Elf and going for a Gigantic Sprite into a blue. We'll use blue to get a copy of Jet, then we'll activate Smashers, going for that back row just in case before special summoning the Jet and proceeding to combat. From here, we should have lethal because they're only at 4,000, 1,200 over the Garua. They will draw a card, and 22 from Toad, and Onibimaru should be enough. So it's time for that all-important game 3, and oh god, they've made us go first. Okay, that can't be good. Our hand is fine, but can't stand up to a really lucky Havnus, so we're just going to have to pray here. They'll go Havnus effect, and yeah, that'll do it. They're going to go for Merly here, shuffling back the Havnus to make a Kitkalos. They'll activate Kitkalos' effect, sending a Rhino Heart to the graveyard, then activating the Rhino Heart in order to send from hand to graveyard a Sheeran, which will trigger shuffling back the Rhino Heart and making a Kaleido Heart. Afterwards, you're going to send a copy of Havnus to the graveyard, which has not activated its graveyard effect yet, ending on a copy of Mudragon as well. They'll activate Mudragon. We can Ghost Ogre it, but that's not enough. We'll go for the Fountain. We'll set the once per turn Flash Fire and pass back to our opponent. They'll activate Albion's effect, sending a Branded in High Spirits, and then go for Perlino. That's going to add them a Merly. They'll activate Sheeran's effect, summoning it, and then milling a Rhino Heart, which they can then summon back, sending the Merly in hand, and then triggering the effect of the Kaleido Heart. We will activate the Flash Fire here on the Rhino Heart. We are able to get rid of it, but unfortunately, it's not going to be enough. We can trigger in a new chain the effect of Fountain. It'll happen on a later chain link, then the Perlino will destroy it, but we have to draw something crazy here, and we just don't. It was basically Nibiru or bust. From here, they can just walk into battle phase with the Dragostapelia and the 2 Tearlament fusion monsters. Whose turn is it anyway? So we're back with the deck, and it's fine, which is admittedly my take on the aforementioned 99% of JRPGs. Let's do the pros and cons. First, the pros. 1. This is probably the best shell for Mystic Mine, not named Mystic Mine Burn. Right now, mine's being played as copies 4, 5, and 6 of Dark Ruler No More, enabling an easy Zeus to board wipe combo. Here, it's a win condition. 2, this deck plays enough on a different axis than Sprite that you're not going to catch all of its hate cards. The density of Runick cards is such that you can do a reasonable cosplay of its pure build and win without ever having to call down the thunder. And 3, Fountain's busted. And the cons. 1, not only is this the best deck for Mystic Mine, a significant amount of its power is concentrated within it. You saw how difficult a time we had not playing it. With all due respect, people are showing up to tournaments prepared for this, and putting all your eggs in the mine basket might not work out. 2, it's hard to play. This deck requires you to be firing on all cylinders the entire time, playing to the single battle phase you're likely to get over the course of a match. And 3, to unlock the full potential of this deck, you really do have to be willing to draw pass Undermine, which is upsetting. All in all, I like this list, but I don't think it's going to become the dominant way to play Sprite.